Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Class is in Session. I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and this show, exclusively on Black Enterprise, highlights the latest happenings inside HBCU classrooms, the business side of HBCU sports, public policy issues facing these historic institutions, and the overall state of Black higher education. I'm excited to have today's special guest, Dr. Meredith Anderson. She's the Director of K-12 Research at UNCF K-12 Advocacy, and she's here to discuss a new report called Hear Us, Believe Us, centering African American parent voices in K-12 education. And what it does is take a comprehensive look at the experiences, the challenges, and aspirations of Black parents as it relates to college readiness, race, parental engagement, and so much more. We are excited to have you. Welcome, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ashley. Excited to be here.
Always excited to have you and hear about the great things that UNCF is doing. UNCF this year is celebrating 80 years of being the leading minority higher education assistance organization. But I'm not sure that many people know what UNCF K-12 advocacy is. So can you tell us a little bit more about that work specifically and what you do?
Sure. So, UNCF, like you said, we've been around for 80 years, but we knew that we had to ensure that the next generation is college ready. And so, for the past 12 years, we have been uplifting the voices of the Black community on various issues related to K-12 education, from race, from college readiness, equity. And so, my role is creating those research reports, talking to members of the community, be it parents, students, counselors, teachers, and making sure that we're dismantling some of those deficit narratives when it comes to our Black communities, because we know they're engaged, they're informed, they're ready to make change. And so we want to ensure that not only we're creating tools, college readiness tools for them, but that we're helping uplift their voices. People know us as a higher education organization, but they'll probably be surprised to know that we have over 20 publications and resources on the K-12 level alone. And so you can find some of those resources at uncf.org, but we have been in the community beating the drum for this K-12 education for over a decade now.
Wow, over a decade. And you said more than 20 publications. That's a really big deal. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about one of those today. Tell us about this newest report, Hear Us, Believe Us, centering African American parents' voices in K-12 education. Tell us about how this started and what the goal of this report aims to do.
Sure. So, the impetus for some of our work was driven with our first report in 2012, which was Done to Us, Not With Us. And that was really centering Black voices, the Black parents. And so with that report, we heard that, again, Black parents were engaged in education, but they wanted more tools and resources. They felt like education was being done to them. And so they also wanted more tools and resources again. And so to that end, we made sure that we created tools for our parents, but we heard from Black leaders, from Black students. And what we call this was our UNCF Perceptions Research Series. And so this is actually the second edition of that. So we surveyed Black parents in the past, and now we surveyed them again. And we wanted to make sure that we're uplifting their voices, figuring out, what are some of their needs, what are some of the key issues in education that affects them and their families, and how can UNCF and as well as policymakers and teachers and school communities help them in meeting their goals for their children. And so really excited about this work and to be able to uplift parent voices, because we know too often that parent voices are rendered silent, but we know that they have been making a difference in education for decades.
Absolutely. Parents are indeed making a difference. And I think,
Yes.
as this report highlights, there's a perception that we are not, or that our families and parents and caregivers are not as engaged. Tell us a little bit about some of the partners that you worked with for this report, and how were parents and caregivers selected also to be a part of this research?
Yeah, so for this particular research, it was a solo UNCF project. However, we did partner with an external research firm to select parents. And so we made sure that this was a national sample of Black parents. And we surveyed them via cell phones, via landlines, asking them these key questions. We wanted to make sure that we also did an oversample of Black parents in Chicago, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Houston, New Orleans, and Memphis. And we also conducted focus groups. And for that, we reached out to certain partners to make sure that we could reach out to some of our parents. So organizations like Urban League helped us in getting parents to talk to. And so, yeah, just wanted to make sure that we had a representative sample of Black parents, and really excited to be able to share some of those key findings that we found.
Got it. Let's hop into some of those key findings. I found a lot of them interesting. So yeah, let's jump into it. Tell us some of the key findings of this new UNCF report.
So, like we saw back in 2012, nearly 90% of Black parents believe it's important for their children to go to college. Over 80% check their child's homework on a regular basis. They talk to their child's teacher on a regular basis. And 93% say they want more opportunities to be involved and more input into education law. So they want to make a difference. They want to make sure their voices are heard. But something different from this perceptions series than the last is that we wanted to make sure that we're highlighting the importance of Black teachers. And so here we found that Black parents reported higher aspirations for college for their child, fewer instances of child suspensions when there were more Black teachers in the classroom. And so again, we also found that Black teachers felt more respected when there were more Black teachers. So we know that Black teachers matter. We've seen the literature for decades that show that Black teachers have an impact from discipline to honors courses. But here we're showing that not only does it matter for Black students, it matters for Black parents and their aspirations for their child as well. And so that's a key piece. But we also found that Black parents wanted to see more Black leaders in education. So 70% of Black parents said that they believe that education efforts would be more effective if there were more Black leaders involved. So making sure that we have Black leaders from the superintendent to the CEO to the community organizations, because we know Black leaders really just help dismantle many of these deficit narratives, but they're also role models for our students. And so that was a key finding for us. But then also we see that school safety was a top factor in choosing a school for Black parents. So of course, academics are important. Of course, representation is important, but Black parents want to know that their children are safe, be that emotional safety, be that safety as it relates to their community, to safe passage. They want to know that their children are cared for, loved, and supported.
Awesome. That's a really big deal, right? Not only just from a
Yeah.
safety perspective and nurturing, but
Yes.
also visibility, Black leadership, Black teachers. I think it was really interesting. One of the findings that the report that you shared was that when there are more Black leaders, fewer Black students are being suspended and reprimanded,
Yes.
right? That's
Hmm.
really, really interesting. Tell
Right.
us,
Right.
how did you all go about finding, or was it with the help of the research firm, finding the parents that were part of this survey or this research, rather?
So we partnered with a national research firm to conduct a national sample of Black to low income to moderate African American parents. And we surveyed them via phone and make sure that they had kids in school. And these were not just parents; they were also caregivers. So they could have been grandparents as well. But we also conducted an oversample in Chicago, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Houston, New Orleans, and Memphis, and also conducted focus groups with parents in some of those areas as well.
Exciting to hear all of this, especially how parents have played a major role, obviously, in lending their voices to this important research and this work, Dr. Anderson. And we actually have a parent joining us today. Ashley Thomas is a mother of three and a parent advocate in Indianapolis. She also is the owner and CEO of A.N.T Foundation Consulting. Hello and welcome, Ashley Thomas.
Hello, Ashley. It is so great to be here today.
We are honored to have you. We are honored to have you. But tell us, Ashley, do you think that there is a perception that Black parents and caregivers are disengaged from their children's educational progress and success?
There is absolutely a perception that Black parents are not really engaged in their children's education. I've worked with predominantly Black and Brown families over the last 11 years, and that is far from the truth. Many times, the lack of information, as you've already heard from Meredith, the lack of knowledge, and when we see a lot of the results coming from this report, as I was looking through, I said, "Wow, this is why when we talk about the pandemic and watch what happened in the pandemic. Resources were everywhere for all parents because all parents needed that. right? And so it was so accessible. You could go wherever you needed to go to find the knowledge. How do you conduct a classroom at home? How do you do all of these things? And when we watch, as we've transitioned out of the pandemic, we watch that those resources again are going back to lesser and lesser. But guess what? The parents are still always the first and most important teacher. They are always co-parenting
Mhm.
with teachers every single year. And so we still have to move in the same way on building the knowledge and the muscles and the tools of parents every single day, like we did in the pandemic. That's not just a pandemic thing, that was just a gift. But ultimately, parents were able to get
Mhm.
engaged even more because someone was there teaching them. Teachers, school leaders, community members, community organizations, everyone, the entire village was circling parents to make sure that our children could be successful. And so we need that village to still move in the same way that it's moved in the pandemic. And even though most of us parents, we don't want all of the heavy lifting of the work to be the full-time educators, but we are the educators at home. It is important for us to help one another because we are co-parenting with teachers in schools every single year. And parents know that, but how to do it is all about us teaching one another.
Love to hear that. That's a new term I think I've heard, that parents and educators are co-parenting together for the educational success of a child. That's a really unique way to think about that, Ashley. I
Mhm.
really like that. Tell us, what other aspects of this UNCF report resonated with you as a parent and as a parent educator advocate?
Yeah, so one, again, the results. I loved the call to actions because a lot of the call to actions are also part of what Ant Foundation gets to pour and support other school organizations, other local organizations. How do we go all across the country as Ant Foundation Consulting and train and coach and make sure that the word is spread? Because when we talk about community organizing, many times it's not that some of the schools or some of these tools are not out there. You've got amazing organizations like UNCF that have actually even contributed to my success and my knowledge as a parent and as a community member and a community organizer. And so ultimately, how do we make
Mhm.
sure that that message is resonating and getting into the right pockets and community? And so sharing that message and looking at those call to actions, ultimately, look, I'm shifting over and I'm going to look at this because I want to tell you, as I was going through creating more intentional opportunities for parent involvement. Absolutely, we do get to create
Mm.
more intentional opportunities. Reports like this should be discussed in schools. Talking to parents about, hey, what is going on? What has happened? What are your thoughts and ideas about it? The study was just to scratch the surface and to share that, hey, we what is possible, but also getting the message out
Mm.
there to parents to say, guess what? People are saying about you, because many times for us, a lot of us Black parents, we hear the negative when something wrong happens, or oh, these parents are not showing up, or this is what we see. We've seen a lot of TikToks around what parents are doing, but the parents are really doing the best that they can, and they are literally really being game changers in this pandemic. Parents were really carrying education, and we get to pat parents on the back for that too and say, hey, that drumbeat, you get to keep that going. So everything about those call to actions for me were like, okay, how do we dive deep into them? And how do we make sure that we're bringing parents alongside of us to say it, call to actions might look different for every school community. That's okay. We get to customize it because these are our babies in each community and each school community, and what they need and desire for their babies. They get to bring that to the table. Bring those parents to the table.
Bring the parents to the table. And you mentioned a customized approach. I think that makes a difference too. Ashley, lastly, what would your one piece of advice be to parents who, listen, they may have young children, or they may feel like, because of my work schedule or different obligations, I want to be more engaged. I just may not know where to start. What would your
Yes.
advice be to those parents to make sure that they are getting a jump start on being engaged in the education of their children?
Yes. My advice is to connect with organizations in your community if you know of any that are already really like lifting up the voices of parents. Every community does not have those. I know for us here in Indy, we have Stand for Children, we've got Rise Indy, of course, we've got UNCF. There are so many different voices, but sometimes we don't know where to find them. Look them up. Try to find the ones that are in your community, but also lifting up your voice and just going in and talking to your child's teacher. And so For
Yeah.
me, I'm a full-time mom. I work full-time as well. I have always worked full-time too. So no matter what your role is, your voice absolutely matters in education advocacy. So my advice to parents is never sit down. Never believe that you
Mm.
and your voice is not valuable. Take a stand for your child, other kids. And by taking a stand, that doesn't always mean that you've got a fight in front of you. Sometimes the fight is just simply you engaging other parents and asking them to show up.
Awesome. Super powerful insights. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you for sharing. Now, Dr. Meredith Anderson, as we wrap up here today, can you tell us what are some of the calls to action for both the K 12 and the higher education sector from this report?
Sure. So, for the K 12 perspective, the number one recommendation that we had was to invest unapologetically in Black teachers because we know they make a difference. We know they're important to Black parents and to students. And so, that's the first recommendation. Two is also create more intentional opportunities for parent involvement because we know parents want to uplift their voices. Three, create a learning environment that reflects African American history and culture. Students want to see themselves. Parents want to make sure that their students are reflected in their texts. But also partner with the local organizations to provide resources and services for families. One of the quick findings was that nearly 50% of parents couldn't name organizations to help them support their children in the learning process. So we want to make sure that we're uplifting those organizations. Also valuing and prioritizing support staff in school budgets like school counselors because we know they make a difference for students. And then lastly, prioritizing student safety on the K-12 level because we know that that's a top concern for Black parents. Now, in terms of the higher education side, we want to make intentional efforts to expose students and families to college opportunities. Though parents had high aspirations for college, they felt schools fell really short in providing them the resources and tools as it relates to higher education in that process. So we want to make a call for HBCUs to work with our families to help them understand about the college process. How can they work with schools and districts? And to that end, we also want to create intentional pipelines with districts and charter management organizations for increasing educator diversity. So we have several HBCUs that are doing great work, like Voorhees, like Claflin with the Call Me Mister program, like Xavier with the Norman T. Francis teacher residency program. And so we want to make sure we're uplifting these models. We've been doing work in the HBCU K-12 partnership space to uplift these particular programs. And so making sure that we're looking to our HBCUs because we know that they have the talent and making sure school districts are reaching out to them for that talent. And then lastly, the last two are ensuring teacher training programs include anti-racist, culturally relevant teaching practices. And again, going back to HBCUs, we know that this is occurring in our educator programs. And so making sure that we're learning from them. Ensuring teacher training programs include anti-racist, culturally relevant teaching practices. We have a report here at UNCF that uplifts the importance of these practices at our HBCUs. And then lastly, partnering with K-12 schools and districts to provide that financial literacy to parents so that they understand ways to pay for college. We know that there's money out there for college, but we want parents to be able to have this information. And so making sure that we're providing that, and as well as UNCF, making sure that we're partnering with parents to uplift the importance of college to these parents as well.
Got it. Lots of really important key takeaways here. And I do want to give a special shout out. You mentioned Voorhees University in my home state of South Carolina. I heard some really dynamic sisters that do a lot with educator training at UNCF's Unite conference last summer, as a matter of fact. They are doing a fantastic job, and some of the other HBCUs you mentioned as well, in preparing teachers to educate our young people. Because as you mentioned, the investment in Black teachers and leaders obviously makes a difference, as this report has found. So thank you so much, Dr. Meredith Anderson, for sharing these insights. We encourage everyone who's watching today to check out the report, Hear Us, Believe Us, Centering African American Parent Voices in K-12 Education. You can check that out on UNCF's website. Thank you all for tuning in. Share this episode with family and friends, and also stay posted for the latest and greatest on Black Enterprise's social media channels and on blackenterprise.com. For this edition of Classes in Session, I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and class is dismissed.